Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak in relation to this bill and just wanted to put on the record my disappointment that the government's tactic is it has to be one or the other. We all agree that we need an emergency response fund and that the government needs to be doing more to support communities affected by emergency disaster, to be doing more to support and help preparedness and work on mitigation. It's just so disappointing that again they try and wedge us in this place by taking the funding from another vital area, and that's in relation to university infrastructure funding. I have a regional university campus in my electorate, the campus of Bendigo La Trobe, who is wanting to expand, wanting to build, wanting to access these funds that have been put aside for such projects, the Education Investment Fund, which will now be abolished. It'll be abolished to create another fund. It's just disappointing that again, after 6 years, we see this government steal from one pot of critical funding to fund another. On the fund itself, this bill creates the Emergency Response Fund to distribute up to $150 million per year for disaster recovery activities. This is in addition to the existing federal fund for disaster recovery efforts. And I know that many, particularly in regional areas, have been calling for such a fund to be created for quite some time. As the climate disaster in our country unfolds, as things start to become tougher in our regions, we are impacted by more and more extreme weather events and natural disasters, whether they be flood, fire, drought, whether they be cyclone. It's hard to imagine any part of Australia these days that is not affected. In regional Victoria, particularly in central Victoria, just in the last decade alone, we've been hit by severe flooding in some parts of my electorate. We've also been hit by severe bushfire in some parts of my electorate. Drought, less so. We've been fortunate to receive rain, particularly this year. However, to the north and to the west, drought has become a major problem. We are also being hit hard by mini tornadoes, something and a term you never used to hear or see in local papers. But these days, extreme weather events have become labelled in a way that we never thought possible. Tornadoes, where they indiscriminately will choose a street, a house, a suburb, nowhere else, and just tear down everything in its path. These areas do require our support and urgent support, and that is why a fund like this is welcomed, because it will help these areas get back on their feet soon. Types of activities that could be funded are broad and include services and adopting technology so that it can be directed towards recovery or building post-disaster recovery resilience. I know that after the devastation of the bushfires over a decade ago, part of the post-disaster recovery resilience programs were incredibly important. I'm home to FRRR, and they are an organisation that partnered with the government at the time and for the last decade or so to help run those programs, helping people with mental health, helping communities rebuild, to tell their story, critical in the process of recovery, but also too in building, rebuilding the human capital, rebuilding the infrastructure capital, whether it be a small disaster, as in it only affects one part of a community, or whether it be a large disaster like we have seen with bushfires or flood in Queensland, there is a role for the federal government to play. So whilst this fund is welcomed because it will help around flood levies, it will help around cyclone shelters, it will help to ensure that after a disaster is struck, that funding is provided, and that the federal government is doing its role to be a funding partner. The problem is it is coming at the expense of critical infrastructure that's needed in our universities. And that's what disappoints me about this government. They're stealing from one sector to pay for another. Our universities do want to expand. They do want to build. They do want to upgrade and make sure that they've got fit-for-purpose classrooms, they've got the latest technology, that the graduates that they're training have the skills and qualifications that are required for the jobs of the future. Yet what the government has proposing to do to fund the Emergency Response Fund is to cut the Education Investment Fund. Why? Why does it have to be one or the other? Why can't it be both? Why does this government prioritise education funding over emergency response? Why can't it be both?